Yes, hello guys. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can wrap an image around an object. So let's start first with some basic shapes. Let's say I take a sphere and I take an image. So the first thing I go to texture setting over here. In texture, you want to go to in material section here, you want to switch to maps and you want to go to a texture map. In texture map, you can choose obviously standard textures and so on. And you can then play with the bump maps and these type of stuff. But for now, what I want to show is how you go with custom textures. Okay, so I have here two different textures that are uploaded. One is a flag, which is a non-repeating image, which means is that, you could repeat them if you use backs. I'll show you later how you could repeat them different ways. But the sense is that this must connect. It's difficult to stitch them if you repeat them one with another. And the other one is a repeating texture. A repeating texture is very easy. A non-repeating texture is quite complicated. So if you see over here, this, basically positions. But how do you adjust the positioning? What's happening? This is actually what's happening when you go to the UVs. Let's go to UVs. So let me just a brief update what UVs are. What you have a 2D image and you have a 3D object. So this is a mismatch. So what's happening is that you need to kind of convert the 3D image, 3D object into a 2D object, kind of unwrap it, the way it's called. And then you need to project the image on top of this. That's basically what's happening on the rendering engine. And there's different ways how you can do that, how you make that match. But ultimately, when you do that, you create something that is called UVs, which is directions for the computer, for your graphic card rendering, how to match the image, the 2D image on top of a 3D object. So there is some different UVs over here. You could choose, you can already see some will make sense in this example, some not. You have a lot of settings, and depending on the use case, what type of UVs you want to do. And plain UVs, you can see they're all different. And then you have something called custom UVs. Now, custom UVs are the UVs that we generate on primitives. So basically, all these you call primitives. The primitive shapes come with built-in custom UVs, which calculated the best way, and that's why custom UVs looks the best in this case. But custom UVs will not always work in more difficult objects, and also if you select parts from objects. I'll show you in a minute. And then we have something that's called generate UVs. This is where we have actually our own unwrapping algorithm, our own stuff, and it takes a minute, and this unwraps it, and look how it's doing it. Actually, you can see it's positioned entirely different, because when this was unwrapped, it actually positioned that these became, if you can think about it on a 2D image, it created a section for this, a section for this. It created completely, different position that. And here you see, this is also where it makes sense, the size of the object. I have some plans to update that and allow you to download the unwrapped image and you can play with it to size them correctly and so on. But you see over here, it starts actually repeating over here, and you have some problems over here, and depending on the matching with the size and things like that. But overall, the shape looks projected differently. Now, when do you need to have the custom UVs? The obvious answer is when you have a custom shape that you don't have built in, and some of the other shapes doesn't work. So let me show you another example. So if you take, let's say, for example, a cube, which is an easy example to show, for example, box map. So I'll take the same image that I used before, this custom texture, and you can see this wrapping on the custom wrapping will go like this. And if you take face mapping, you see they're all different, and box mapping, and you could play with the amount of tiles, amounts of stuff here to position them differently. And if you go to the custom again, you see this looks the nicest, the built-in. And if you generate custom UVs, you can already see this actually, it has a problem here with the repeating a little bit. I think this actually may be some issue that may be fixed. I'm actually not sure. I'll give it actually to our technical team to see this repeating issue. But nevertheless, that's kind of a different way of projecting it, and that's how this looks. Okay, so when it makes the most of a difference is, so let's take another shape. Let me just take an example, something more irregular shape. So I'll take a look at a cone and maybe a torus. It's a little bit more not so regular shape. So let's first take a look at this shape. If I wrap an object on this, the same texture, on this, this would be okay, something like this with custom. And if I generate my UVs, this will create it, you see, much nicer actually in this case. But again, let me show you now the main thing. Then I'll go to custom texture. I mean to repeating textures, which actually Socket supports very well. So what if I select just parts of it, of the object? Oh, I'm turning my face selection. I select just parts of it, okay? You see, just selected just half of it. And I want to add a texture to this. In this case, first thing you see is when you click on this, it will give you an alert that you're going to convert them to different material. Because technically what's happening is you're going to create a new material now. And if you have a lot of faces with different textures, you'll end up having a lot of materials, which eventually, if you have too many of them, will slow down the application. There is a concept in advanced rendering where you can take a lot of these and combine them into one. That's called baking. Selk is in the process of adding a lot of advanced rendering. We have all of the basics, realistic rendering, but these thing baking is still yet to be added, and this is something we're working on. But nevertheless, that's for now the case. So if I'm going to go to a custom texture and apply this, this wouldn't look nice because the custom UVs wouldn't know how to handle part of an object in this case. And in any of these UVs, it will be actually quite difficult to get it working, to get the entire image wrapped. So if I generate my UVs over here, this actually looks quite nice because it generated UVs just for this. So in any case, that's basically the idea of what you have over here. Okay, so let's take a look now at the repeated texture. I'm going to just delete this object, and let's take a look at this. And you can see, as you can see now, it's not really very well supported now with non-repeating textures. And the reason for that is that the only way you can do non-repeating texture, and software that do support that, is by manually unwrapping. What I mean manually unwrapping is that, let me first show you this example, then I'll go back to that. So if you take here, let's say, a repeating texture, okay, you can see over here this doesn't look nice at all. It's a repeating texture created in Photoshop, a simple image, like kind of a bump image, a bump map. And this actually where it comes into the bump maps, normal maps, if you want to see them, to be able to add some the details. But still, this doesn't look nice. And if you go over here, different UVs, you can start playing. This already looks much nicer. Still, based on the face how it's projected. But still, the best way you get on repeating texture is if you go to the custom UVs, and this looks very nice. This generates the UVs, and it looks actually quite nice. And if you go to the maps, the bump maps, you can start seeing them. Let's say take this or normal map. You can start seeing the details actually start showing up. Okay, so you can start seeing it will start showing some more details, and it will be easier to see. This image doesn't have that many kind of hard details. So let me show you an example actually on a default image where you can see it. So let's see, I'll go to a wood. Okay, so if I take this wood, again, let me first go to the generate UV so it looks nicer, but it doesn't have the details from the wood you see over here. So if I go to the bump maps or normal maps, and if I start selecting this, I can see which one it is, for example. I think normal map should look better than this one. So if I do over here, not custom, sorry, what do I do over here? Wood, and let's take this one. Okay, so you can start seeing over here that this actually starts adding the details from this. So you can see the details get added. Yeah, it's a little bit difficult on this type of image because they're getting skewed very small. Let me show you this example on a cube, for example. This should be easier to see it. And if I'm going to add here, let's see, if I'm going to add here a wood, for example, let's say the same wood, okay? So you don't have that many details over here. Let's go to the bump map and select this. Okay, now you can see it. You can see how this comes in. And over there it was stretched, it was too thin, repeated too many times, you couldn't see it. But over here, if you have a large space here to repeat it, you can actually see these bumps start coming up. But anyways, I'm sorry I went on a tangent explaining the maps. That's not the subject of this video. So the idea here is that self-repeating images, these are also repeating images, are very well supported. And as I said, the main idea is just to map them, and it doesn't really matter in the order you map them. So what's happening is when you have this generate UVs, what this is actually doing, this is actually projecting it with a kind of a packing algorithm, which basically means is it will take the object and it will unwrap it on the smallest space to make sure it fits in to the small space and compact it into a small image, compact. And what this is doing is this is actually very good for optimizing. If you want to have the image repeated on top of the texture, texture on top of the object, this will be optimized and looking very good. Um, and this is the default, which is in some applications is called like smart unwrapping. That's basically what this is doing. It's a smart unwrapping. When you want to map something more a non-repeating texture, the only way to do it is a tedious process where you have to tell the computer like where to unwrap where. So you can tell the computer, for example, these two faces, you want them to unwrap separately, and this separately, and these. And in that case, the computer makes sure it's simply unwrapping it, but it's not splitting these faces. It keeps them together, and it unwraps it in such a way. It's a very tedious process. It's like modeling an object, and that's an advanced feature. So we'll likely eventually add that. At the moment, that's not what we had focused on. At the moment, we'll probably first add the baking type of stuff, and and for the basics, maybe some other settings as far as making sure when it repeats and so on. But very complex objects on non-repeating textures on complex objects is something sadly that it's at the moment not very well supported. But that's basically all you have. Just before I let you go, one more thing to show you is that all of these are when you talk about images. If you want to wrap actual objects, so let's say, for example, I go to Image 3D and I want to convert this object onto a map. So let's say I'll take the same thing over here and I convert it into an object. Okay. In that case, if you want to wrap a 3D object onto another object, this is actually a total different operation. This is something you use the follow path tool. So let's say, for example, we're going to go to a custom drawing. Let's just take a spline and draw something, something just random. Okay. So let's say if I want to wrap this image on top of this. So again, it has a lot to do with the size also of this, if the size matches this size. But the way follow path works is you take an object that you want to follow, and you take a path you want this object to follow, and then you go to the follow path, and you have two options. You can duplicate or you can wrap. In this case, I want to wrap it around, and look how this is wrapping this object around. There are different settings here. You can, if you want them to repeat, when it becomes repeat means basically if it becomes smaller or bigger, it kind of matches on this. If this spline would be much longer, instead of stretching it, it will repeat it. And the same thing is if it's smaller, it will kind of cut it off in the middle. Instead of shrinking the image, it will cut it off. So repeat is kind of like exact fit and then cut or extend duplicates. And then you have duplicates. In this case, this is a heavy image, 27,000. If you start duplicating a lot of images, you may end up slowing down the computer, depending on how much you duplicate. But nevertheless, that's kind of what you do with these type of settings. That's a total different operation. But yeah, that's basically it. I hope this helps, and let me know what you think. Thank you.